The more personal issue to each one of you in the room is a decision by the Board of Directors to increase the National Association portion of your dues by $40 for the coming year. Nobody likes an increase. Nobody wants to pay more at the pump. Nobody wants to pay more for gas. But there was a very specific reason that this was very controversial and has been talked about for the last month, month and a half. Earlier this year, there was a Supreme Court ruling that allows for corporations to take soft money, meaning their investment monies and their profit shares, and invest directly into campaign messages. Now, there's a little bit of disconnect in terms of political process if you're not really familiar with it, so I'm going to try to break it down to make it easy for you. Everybody understands RPAC, correct? Is everybody participating in RPAC? If you're not, I'm going to give you a really hard sell in just a minute, but you should be. RPAC is called hard money dollars. The RPAC funds that we collect can only go to candidates, to the candidate campaign. So if we see a person that we know is a good quality leader, someone that listens and can understand the issue and is very respectful of listening to all sides of the issue, we can contribute money to their campaign. But there's other monies that are out there called soft monies, and those soft monies are the monies that you see on the other TV commercials where it says paid for by, and it's not the campaign for that candidate. It's the X party, or it is the green group, or it is whatever it is that wants to carry the message about the issue and the candidate. And those monies were regulated until the Supreme Court decision came down this year. And the soft monies now allows all different kinds of groups to start putting money on the table for and against candidates and issues. Because we're a nonprofit organization at the National Association, we didn't have any option to do that until this rule came up. Everybody played by the same hard money rules, and what little soft money was available really wasn't much of an impact at that point. Now any group can be able to make those kinds of major dollar contributions to an issue. NAR did not have any funds set aside to do that because it wasn't an option before. In the last election cycle, since 2010, which is what, last year? 5,000 new PACs have been chartered. 5,000 more groups want to have their message out there without going through a candidate pool. So 5,000 more groups may have an impact on the message that's delivered to the consumer who's going to vote, whether it's on an issue or on a candidate. We didn't have the arsenal set up to do that. So the $40 increase is a dedicated dues increase that will go specifically to an advocacy campaign. It's called the Realtor Political Party Survival Initiative. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. I think maybe you heard last year that there were several issues about energy efficient ratings on homes. That's not necessarily in the best interest of the consumer, although there were some good and bad points of the legislation that was proposed. They were going to rank every property with an A, B, C, D, or F rating on its energy efficiency so that the consumer would know prior to purchasing whether or not it was energy efficient. Would they have to pay more for their electricity or gas, those kinds of things. Well, you all know any kind of labeling in this industry is detrimental to the message. I may love older homes on East Main Street where you have high windows and high ceilings and old houses that, oh, by the way, happen to be in a historical overlay district, and you can't make some of these changes to be more energy efficient. Is suddenly that $450,000 house on East Main Street only going to be qualified for maybe $250,000? Don't you think that's a detrimental issue? Well, yes, it is. We have pushed that issue back because they couldn't fund it. That was the biggest issue. The federal government couldn't afford to fund the labeling process, but it has not gone away. Suppose Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson decides that the conservation and energy efficiency issue is enabling them to do and sell more products. And they decide that they're going to step out and say, we're going to put $50,000 on the table in this market and $500,000 in the metro area markets to tell people how important this message is. you, the consumer, would want to know whether that house is going to cost you more in the future, right? Well, we want to make sure that Joe Smo gets elected because he's going to support that. We don't have any arsenal to fight that message. That's what the $40 is for. Now, that's a scenario that we've kind of created, but we know that's the kind of message that can happen. And if we're not prepared to be able to step up and say, yes, there's some concerns for energy efficiency, and yes, there's concern for carbon footprints and all of these kinds of things, but make sure you understand that the current property owner is going to take a substantial hit, a major loss, simply because they choose not to make the changes and sell it as it is, or they don't have the options because of restrictions to the marketplace. So that $40 dues increase, which is like, what, $2, $3 a month overall the year, is dedicated to making sure our message is clear. 2012 is another election year. If we don't have the money in hand to start spending it at the first of the year to make sure those election messages are clear, we're going to be the ones that were lost. There was an option on the table, instead of a $40 dues increase, to take the $35 of the public awareness campaign money that they already collect and just kind of slide it over. Discounting the message that we already need to be making to the consumer was not in our best interest, and it was argued for a long time in many, many meetings whether or not that was a better and more respectful way of using our money to help the members not have to come up with additional dollars. It was decided that the message about what realtors are and what we all do in this industry back to the consumer who's confused and scared to make a purchase in the first place, or already upside down and seeing no end to it, we really needed to keep that message going forward. So the $35 is in place. The $40 dues increase is in place, and it will be collected for the 2012 dues and the 2013 dues. Hopefully, over time, we will be able to build an arsenal specifically for soft money campaigns, but that was the point. It wasn't my first option. I was hoping that we would be able to not put that on top of what we already need to be able to do to help at the state and local level. But I see more as I listened to more arguments and got more information about why it was important, that $40 is hard at one lump sum. I got that. First of all, I'm not getting it, so don't call and fuss at me when you pay your check, please. But secondly, that money is for you. It's not going into some other program or something else. It's going right back out on the airwaves to make sure your message is clear. So I know that there's going to be a lot of discussion about it come September, October, when people start going, gee, my dues are going to come up in December. What am I supposed to do? When you get the invoice and it now says it's got a $40 increase on the national portion, don't be surprised, but then also don't be upset, because it's in your best interest that they're trying to make sure we're not losing a foothold. When 5,000 new packs were created in the last year, that tells us that we've got a lot more people that now they have the option to use those dollars are going to be using those dollars, and we need to be right back up there on top of the heap with our message out loud and clear. Over the years, the Realtor political party has been the strongest and clearest voice in Washington. That might not seem like a big deal to us in Murfreesboro and in Middle Tennessee very often, but it is a very, very big deal. When we are able to go into the House of Representatives and speak to each one of them with knowledge and information, things like the health care bill, which had a little bitty paragraph in the middle of the 4,000 pages of text that created a really weird, but it's there, tax on sales of properties, not related to health care, mind you. It just happened to slide in there. We found it, and we told them what they've done. So they amended some of that language to make sure it wasn't nearly as impactful, but it's there. We are the respected voice of real estate and the consumer in real estate issues. And if we weren't able to do that, if we weren't knowledgeable, well-staffed, well-respected with our message, they'd just blow us off, and we'd lose, and our consumers would lose as well. So that was a huge issue all week long, people covering all those kinds of messages. There was a lot of other good information that came from some of the committees, some of the activities that were going forward. And I'll probably have a summary of all those in the newsletter next week. I put some of it in this week's newsletter, but I've got more information, a lot of technology updates and other things that kind of came out that are good for our members and good tools for you all to use. But I hope that you'll consider using national meetings as a real opportunity, not only for education and networking, but bring your family, allow them to enjoy that time when you can write it off as a business expense. I think it's important that we are there, that our voice is heard, and we bring back the message of what's going on so that you find value in your membership and it's there for you and you don't feel like it's just a check at the end of the year. Hopefully we are providing services that you appreciate and help keep you in business. Yes, ma'am.
Was there any talk or anything about cycling the dues to like fiscal end of June versus January? It just seems, if we're doing an increase, and I had talked to Wayman about this a couple months ago, if there was any way to either split the local and national and either do some kind of half in June, but I know, because you're cycling January to January, but maybe for next June say, hey, we're going to charge in January, but what about splitting?
We have for the last 2 years offered the option for someone to prepay their dues in September and October before my November required invoicing. The bylaws of the association require that I invoice on November 15th. Unless I have a membership vote to change that date, that's what it is. Yeah, that kind of makes it difficult. But at the same time, we have, as a policy created for the last 2 years, the option for members to prepay their local portion, which would be the one I can control, and pay it at this year's rate. So if we had a dues increase on the local portion, you wouldn't be penalized for it because I'd already have that in the bank, and that would only be the other half would be coming due at the end of the year or later. But September and October, we already allow for that and have for the last 2 years. Hadn't had a lot of takers.
Well, and that's what I was wondering. It comes at the slowest point of our market,
sure,
and right after the holidays. So,
We'll continue to offer the opportunity to and basically that does about split it in half by taking state and national together. Well, now theirs is going to be a little top heavy, and then the local portion is about half, and that kind of keeps us in perspective.